latest episode of the Hormone Cafe. Today I have with me Kelly Sinning, and she is a licensed professional counselor, and she also is certified in perinatal mental health. So I'm thrilled to have her because I really wanted her to talk about a lot of the things that we struggle with when we're going through fertility and how we can keep ourselves mentally healthy. So things that she thought were particularly important are: how does your relationships with people change? How does your relationship with your spouse change? What you can kind of do to help with that 2-week wait, and then other kind of coping mechanisms or strategies for our mental health when we're struggling with those fertility challenges. And we get our negative pregnancy test, we get our period, we're super bummed. So thanks so much for being here. Of course. I know you had mentioned the relationships being something that's really important. Mm-hmm. How do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, I think that when people are going through fertility, it either is easy or hard, right? Not a lot of people are kind of in this middle ground of like, they feel fine about it. And something that's so surprising to people is that the relationships change, right? Of like, you're no longer happy for your friends when they get pregnant, or you no longer want to go to baby showers, or you are mad, right? A lot of people have a lot of anger that comes up and it feels really unnatural. And things like that start to change. And so something I talk a lot about with my clients is that sometimes our relationships with our friends and people that we really love and care for change, and that it's not a forever thing. It's just a period, right? It's this season of life where we're in such a different position and we have such different needs and hardships that it's hard to be in the same space with people that aren't experiencing that, and letting ourselves just accept that that part is changing for this season, and then how do we take care of ourselves? Because I think a lot of times I have a lot of clients that want to push through that feeling, and they still go to the baby showers and they try to deliver like 4 meals right after their friends have kids, and then they feel mad or resentful or just really sad for themselves that they're not in that place, and it ends up creating just all kinds of yucky feelings about our relationships, and then we say weird things and the interactions don't feel good. So a lot of times I tell people just to let yourself scale back a little bit. Let yourself meet your own needs in that period of life versus trying to be the person you were before that, right? Because you need different things in different seasons, and that there's nothing wrong with that. And so we have a lot of conversations about how do you honor where you're at so that you can have a solid friendship on the other side of that season too.
Yeah, and you maybe have to do different things to be like the good friend.
Yeah, right? Of like, we can love people from afar. Like, we can send people a text message, or we can send them a card in the mail. We don't necessarily need to go to 6 baby showers in 6 weeks, right? I think a lot of people, they get in this season of life where everyone is having kids, and if that's a struggle for you, then that is a hard season to be in, and it's hard to be excited for so many people all the time. When, I think when we want to have kids, like, it is a very deep desire to be able to do that. And so it can feel just really overwhelming in a lot of different ways to be in those spaces. And sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves and for our friendships is just to kind of step away a little bit and see how it looks to be a little bit different in that season, right? If like, I'm really struggling, can I actually show up for you? Or do I just need to say, I love you, and I'm sorry that we're in different spaces right now, but I'm so happy for you, right? And just not guilt tripping ourselves that that's where we're at, right? Because I think a lot of times we just feel a lot of guilt at not being able to be the friend that we've always been, or always been. And sometimes we just can't, and that's okay.
But I feel like just acknowledging that can be really powerful. And that if you have that relationship, like acknowledging that to your friend, is that you still love them and you're just in a different space.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, like, there's a lot of compassion, right? That if we can just acknowledge that, a lot of times the response and the feedback is like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. Do what you got to do. And I know that you love me, and you know that I love you, and we're good, but I get it. Right? It's just a different season that we're in. But I think a big thing, like you said, there's a lot of freedom in just acknowledging that that's where we're at, because then, like, we're working off of honesty instead of working off of just pretense that we're trying to put out there, or like this, what we're trying to make the world see, even if that's not what we feel inside.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah,
for sure.
Oh, this is the worst.
Yes. You see them 17th friend get pregnant on Instagram. Yeah. What about spouses? I feel like that is also a huge one. Like, how do you keep a positive relationship with your spouse when you're just sick of having sex on your LA search?
Oh, it is a good conversation to have. And I think that, that relationship with your spouse totally changes. And it doesn't necessarily have to change for the worse, right? But I think there has to be some communication around it, because it is just hard, right? And there are things that you don't anticipate being hard that are hard, right? Like, I don't think any man goes into that thinking like, I'm gonna hate having sex in a few months, right? But a lot of times we get there of like, the only time we're having sex is on our LH surge, and there's so much pressure to do it, and there's so much pressure on the outcome of it, and that, it's, talk about a buzzkill, right? Like, it just is hard. It gets really challenging. And I think that we don't expect it when we're going into it to feel like that. So when those feelings start to creep in, to be able to have a conversation about it of like, this is changing, and being able to come together somehow of like, this is still what we want. This is still worth it. This looks different. How, and even sometimes having conversations of like, when we're done with this, what do we want our sex life to look like? What do we want romance to look like? What do we want fun to look like for the two of us? And being able to kind of project outward and kind of plan for that. And then again, right, like just being in a different season and figuring out with your spouse, like, what does this season look like? What does connection with this season look like? And if it was sex before, and maybe it's not sex now, right? So maybe it's holding hands or cuddling or going to movies together, or not talking about anything serious, or talking about other things that are serious, right? So trying to just figure out what it looks like now to feel connected, to feel loved, to feel, nurtured by each other, and letting it be okay that it may be different than it was preconception, right? Like trying to have babies. Because I think a lot of times it really does change. And we do ourselves a disservice when we try to force things to stay the same, right? When we're in a totally different season of life, when we're trying to do different things, but we want all the old ways to still work the way they always did. And maybe now those things just don't work anymore, and we have to shift a little bit. But I think having that mindset is huge, because then you can shift with it. But if we feel like, we used to always connect over sex, or we used to always connect over, like, I don't know, flirting or going out together, and that doesn't feel good anymore. If we try to force that, it's going to feel really just incongruent and just not real, right? And so I think that's where we do ourselves a disservice and our relationships a disservice, because we're trying to like just put a square peg into a round hole. And if we can just be like, oh, let me just shave the corners a little bit, and then we can figure that out, then it can be a lot better. But I think a lot of times it just kind of hits us like a Mack truck. We're not expecting it to shift so much, or in the ways that it does, so we're just unprepared for it. So I think the biggest thing is having conversations, being able to know how to have these talks with your spouse, right? So that's another thing I talk a lot about, is like, have conversations about how to have the conversation. Right, like if you just hit them right off the word with the sex talk, it might not go over well. Yeah, it might not go over well, right? But like, do we need humor? Do we need to be really serious? Do we need to like go out and have a sit-down conversation about this? Or how do we bring it up in a way that doesn't immediately like put us on edge or on the defense or make us resentful, right? Are there any trigger words that we need to leave out of the conversation? And a lot of times having a conversation about how to have the conversation just sets the stage really well for being able, like, just letting that be a lot more fluid and not so scary to do. Because sometimes those conversations are like, we build them up in our heads for weeks, like, oh, I have to talk about this. And every time something comes up, we're like, oh, I should have talked about it. And right, it's like this big bubbling anxiety sometimes that, if we can prepare for it, then we're just like, okay, now I know what to do here. And we've both talked about it. So we're both expecting it. We're on the same page. And it can be really helpful.
No, we're not just like blindsiding our husband with this kind of anxiety that we've been bottling up, and they're like, "Where is this coming from?
What do you mean?
Oh, but they're feeling it too, probably, right? Just in a different way.
Absolutely. You know, I think that a lot of the men that I work with, and I work with a decent amount of men, right? They all feel it, but it just looks so different, and the way that men cope with it is typically different too. I think as women, we more so have this desire to like lean into connection and lean into conversation, and we want to talk it out, and we want to understand each other's feelings. And a lot of times men, they want to retreat, right? Of like, this is heavy, this is hard, there is nothing I can do to change this or fix it or control the timeline or the outcome. So that feels better to retreat. And that what looks like more like I want to spend more time with my friends, or I'm drinking more, or I'm going out more, I'm not coming home as early anymore. And it's just a difference in the way we cope with things, right? So if we kind of have this conversation of like how we talk about this stuff when it comes up, it's way easier to do, right? So then we don't feel like we're stuck with all these thoughts and feelings, and we don't know where the other person is at, and we're just kind of, it's like the blind leading the blind, right? Of like, I don't know what to do. This doesn't feel good, but we both still want to have kids, so we're just going to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's such a good point, though. Just like setting the expectation of like we're in a different season, and it's okay.
Yeah,
to have a different bonding than we did before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Different types of bonding, different mindset around that.
Yeah, and like maybe just what you need it to look like in that phase, which it can be so different with every phase, right? So, but I think that having that mindset, having that conversation, setting the stage for all of that, all of the change, it just makes it so much easier, right? It's like we give ourselves the permission slip to be able to just shift and change and adapt when we need to, versus feeling like we need the things that have always worked to still work, even when they are really not working.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Sometimes we just don't know what else to do, so we just have that thing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Another thing that people just have a lot of anxiety about is like the 2-week wait, because we make a plan, we change something, we do medications, they're tracking, and then you have sex and you're like, my boobs are hurting, like all these things. When should I take a pregnancy test? How do you sort of navigate some of those massive anxieties as when you're in this kind of like big roller coaster of like, I have hope, no, I'm depressed, I have hope again.
The 2-week wait. It's terrible. Something is like plan for it, right? So like if you want to do something, like schedule something fun during that time. Schedule something that has nothing to do with like pregnancy or fertility or sex, or like just plan something that's enjoyable, so that your mind is going to be on the 2-week wait, right? You're going to be thinking about, am I pregnant? Am I feeling any of these signs of pregnancy? But if we also have something else to look forward to, then it occupies a little bit more of our space. So I think that that's something that I encourage all my clients to do, because it's a hard 2 weeks and it's a really long 2 weeks, and it's just going to be that no matter what it is, right? So being able to have something that you're really looking forward to, that's exciting, right? That's like something on the calendar, I think can help it go by faster and be a little bit more enjoyable. Something else that I talk a lot with my clients too is like, be honest about who you are in the 2-week wait. Like if you're someone that's not going to take a pregnancy test until the day your period is due, like good on you. Like plan for that. Like you have 2 full weeks to just like live your life, figure something else out, right? Just enjoy other pieces, do other things. If you're someone that's like, I want to start taking pregnancy tests on day 8, don't convince yourself that you're a day 14 pregnancy test taker. Right? Just start doing that. And then like you can really just kind of get your head around like, yeah, I'm going to do that. It may be negative. Okay, if it's negative at day 9, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to feel? Probably disappointed. Okay. And then what I'm going to do after that? I'm going to go meet up with a friend, or I'm going to go get a like nice coffee, or I'm going to go, I don't know, watch a movie or something, right? But being able to plan for that. Like I was always someone that was like, between day 8 and 9, I was like starting to take pregnancy tests, right? I couldn't wait. And pretending that I would wait was just like, it was almost this pressure, just unnecessary pressure of like, that's just not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do that. I'm
You're like, can I wait one more day? Yeah.
Right. So I think that also just being honest with that, right? It starts us off like at a good baseline of like, this is just who I am. This is what feels good to me. And then how do I plan around that so it can feel as good as possible, knowing that of course it's going to feel bad if you get a negative pregnancy test, right? So being able to really kind of roll with that line of thinking of like, who am I? What do I need? What kind of fun or enjoyable or stress-free or, things can I do during this time? Who can I talk to about this stuff, right? Having kind of outlets every day, and then just being honest about like, okay, this is what this looks like for me. And this is what I need this to look like for me. And there's not a right answer, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do. It's just that there's more of a chance, right, of being disappointed if you take earlier tests than later. But at the end of the day, the outcome's the outcome, and it doesn't matter, right? You can be whoever you are in that. And so I talk a lot about that too with people during the 2-week wait of don't try to force yourself to wait until day 14 if you are a day 9 test taker.
That's so true. Just being honest about who you are and that you run a little anxious or more data feels good to you. Or that's,
absolutely.
And even just anticipating how you react can be huge too.
Yeah.
Because it's like the day you get a negative test, it just like ruins your day sometimes and you feel so horrible.
Yeah.
And even maybe anticipating, okay, I know I'm going to take a test on this day or what is that? How should I feel? And maybe, it's playing around that.
Yeah. Right.
Like
if you know you're going to be disappointed, right? And you know what you feel like when you're disappointed. Like, are you introspective? Do you need to be alone? Do I need to be around people? Do I need to be outside? Do I need it to be dark and like devoid of sensory, right? Or do I need to be stimulated and be like around a lot of things? Everybody's different in that way. But if we can kind of think that stuff through, we can take care of ourselves really well in the midst of really hard things. And I think that is something that we forget, right? Or we just don't think about, right? We're not taught to think that way of like, how do I take care of myself when things get hard? We think like, how do I avoid the hard thing? But this is one of those things where we can't necessarily do that. So if we can think like, okay, when I'm disappointed or upset about something, I am somebody that I'm like quick to anger, my temper is higher, or I only want to be around people that know me really, really well, so I don't feel like I have to mask any of those feelings. And I can plan for that, right? I can ask my best friend if she's able to like meet me for lunch and we can talk it through, right? Or if I just want to be alone, I can wander Barnes & Noble and talk to strangers only and not have any deep conversations. But there's a lot of care that we can give ourselves if we just think through it a little bit and think about what I need as an individual, as my unique self. But a lot of times we just don't do that, and we're blindsided by disappointment, and it's hard to figure out what to do when we're in the midst of it. It's so much easier to take care of ourselves if we can have like a little bit of forward thought on it and have a little bit of a plan.
Yeah, instead of, because sometimes we'll just react.
Yeah, and when we react, it's, more times than not, it's not great, right? And it just feels out of control, too. It feels really chaotic, which doesn't feel good in this season of life, right? If you really want to get pregnant and you're not, having chaos doesn't feel good. Like, we want to grasp onto control. We want to find things that we have control over. And caring for ourselves is one of those things, right? So I think another thing is being able to identify what can I control and what is outside of my control. So a lot of times our brain, it kind of like throws us to the side of like, here are all the things that you can't control, but you really want to control them. So we're going to pretend that we can in these certain ways, right? And then it's just kind of wasted energy. But if we focus on the things that are within our control, then we can get a solid grasp on them, then we can feel a lot better. But it feels counterintuitive, right? It feels like, why would I be planning for a negative pregnancy test if I want to get pregnant? Right? But like the reality is that sometimes that happens, and knowing how you're going to take care of yourself can be really valuable in those seasons.
Yeah, that's huge. And if it's positive, great. Yeah. And then you celebrate. You have like a plan. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's I love that. That is so helpful. Is there anything, I mean, just in our general fertility journey, it can be like really mentally taxing. How do we keep ourselves mentally healthy in that season?
I think that, I think the whole thing can be really mentally taxing because, like you said, we go through these like waves of like, I have so much hope, and now I'm really depressed, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. And I'm so hopeful, right? And we're just constantly riding this wave of emotions and feelings and thoughts that are like stark contrasts, right? Like we're not like doing this little thing here. Like we are up and down. And that in and of itself can be just tiring, right? Even the hope is tiring, right? Because then we have the crash that comes after that. And so I think that another, again, being really honest about that, of like, that's where we're at. Like, that's kind of what this season brings for a lot of people, right? It's not this like very steady feeling. It's this really high and really low. And sometimes we kind of hit that middle ground, but there are a lot of highs and lows. And just being honest about that can be really, really helpful too, right? Because if we go into it thinking or trying to convince ourselves, like, I'm going to be fine. Like, I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to still excel in these things. I'm going to still keep up with all these friends. Like, my husband and I are still going to go on 2 date nights a week, and like, it's going to be fun. And then we're tired, or we're sad, or we're angry, or we're like overly excited, and all we can talk about is like fertility and what I'm doing and like all the things, right? That it just is a lot. And if we can be honest about, okay, that's probably what this season will be, highs and lows, then we can ride that wave a little bit better. It's like, I don't know, if you were like out to sea and like all these waves kept coming in and you were just trying to like swim your laps, right? Like you're not in a lap pool, right? You're in the ocean. Yeah. And if you can like ride the wave when it comes in, then it feels a lot better and you get a lot farther, But I think another thing of fertility is that it's just prolonged grief, right? Like every cycle that we don't get pregnant is just grief. And it's also invisible grief, right? It's grief that people don't really understand very much. So it's something of like when we're grieving, right? Like if we have lost a loved one, what would we encourage people to do, right? Of like, think about it and talk to people about them and reach out to people that you're close to or you feel comfortable with. And I think that fertility is kind of the same thing if we can do that, right? Talking to people who've also had a hard time or experienced losses, right? Of like what that feels like and what you picture, and being able to find support that way of people that have somewhat of an understanding, because there is just a lot of grief in the journey. And, whether you've been trying for 3 months or 3 years, every time you get period, it just feels like a loss, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're having a pregnancy loss or not, it feels like loss. So I think that's another thing too, of just kind of protecting our mental health during this phase, of knowing that there will be high highs, there will be low lows. And if we can treat it as such and kind of find the support we need within that, it can feel a lot better, right? The highs will still be high, the lows will still be lows. That's not going to change. But the way we feel within that and feeling supported, or, within like a community that feels good, right? We don't have to feel isolated. We don't have to feel so lonely within it. I think that's the thing that the majority of women that I work with feel in this phase of life. They feel lonely. Mm-hmm. They feel frustrated. They feel angry. They feel like something's wrong with them. And all of those things, that's really hard to go through alone. Yeah. So being able to have a good community and have people that you can talk to about that kind of stuff, I think can feel really, really life-giving in a season that is kind of bumpy.
Yeah, because you're right. Some people, they just won't understand. They just won't understand what they're going through.
Yep, absolutely, right? I think we all have like one friend that's just like, oh, I looked at my spouse and I got pregnant again. I'm like, well, cool.
Yes, it's easy to compare to someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, but like sometimes people just don't get it, right? Or people don't want children. Like they're not going to understand what that desire feels like. And if they can't understand the desire, they can't understand the grief that comes along with it too, right? And those are not the people that we want to be confiding in during this phase, right? And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or like those friendships aren't valuable, right? It's just that I want to be talking to people who can have empathy for what I'm going through and have somewhat of an understanding of the, just how big it all feels and how much the desire to have children, to have a family, drives things.
Yeah, I love that. And just kind of thinking ahead about what you might need that month.
Yeah.
And if your relationships change, like, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the same. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't have to be like that forever. But this season, this is what you might need. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so great. Well, thank you so much. It was so helpful to talk about all these things, and things that we just wanted to go over today with y'all are, how do our relationships change? What does that look like with our friends? What does that look like with our spouses? What are some things that we can just do to help that 2-week wait not be so painful? And then just general things that we want to think about, strategies for our mental health when we're struggling in our fertility journey. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Hormone Cafe. In next episode, we'll have Kelly back and we'll talk about just how to keep ourselves healthy from a women's health and cycle standpoint. So join us for our next episode.
Yep.